Welcome to Meet Patel Audiobooks. If you enjoyed, consider subscribing. Let's begin.
Open Book Daily Life of a SuperDadSystem. Chapter 71, A Moment That Stayed. The evening returned quietly after their time at the university. The apartment carried its usual calm atmosphere, but something between Ryan Carter and Sophia Reed had subtly changed again. Not dramatically, just enough to be noticed. Ryan stood near the kitchen counter preparing something simple, while Sophia sat nearby, with Liam resting peacefully against her shoulder. The soft lighting made the apartment feel warmer than usual. "You handled today well," Sophia said softly. Ryan glanced at her. "I was more worried about you." She gave a faint smile. "You thought I wouldn't fit in?" Ryan shook his head. "No, I just wasn't sure how it would feel." Sophia looked at him for a moment before speaking again. "And now?" Ryan paused briefly. It felt natural. Her expression softened slightly at his answer. New task generated. Strengthened emotional closeness. Ryan continued preparing drinks quietly before walking over and handing one to her. As Sophia reached for the glass, their fingers touched again. But this time, neither moved away immediately. The silence between them grew softer, warmer. Ryan remained standing beside her instead of stepping back. Sophia looked up at him calmly. "You've changed a lot," she said quietly. Ryan smiled faintly. "I think you did too." A small laugh escaped her. Very soft. Very real. For a moment, neither spoke. Liam slept peacefully between them, the room calm enough for even small breaths to feel noticeable. Then Sophia leaned slightly closer. Not enough to surprise him. Just enough to close the distance that no longer felt necessary. Ryan's heartbeat slowed instead of racing. Everything felt calm. Natural. And before he could overthink the moment, Sophia gently rested her forehead against his shoulder for a brief second. Task completed. Reward, emotional comfort increased. Additional reward, $100 added. Ryan didn't focus on the reward. Because right now, the moment itself felt more important than anything the system could give him. Open Book Daily Life of a SuperDadSystem. Chapter 72, Closer Than Before. Night settled quietly over the apartment, wrapping everything in soft silence. Liam had already fallen asleep, leaving the room calmer than usual. Ryan Carter sat near the window while Sophia stood beside him, looking out at the city lights stretching across Aurendale. Neither spoke for a while, but the silence didn't feel distant anymore. It felt shared. "You've been smiling more lately," Sophia said softly. Ryan glanced at her. "Maybe." She looked at him briefly. "It suits you." Ryan let out a quiet breath, smiling faintly again. "You notice a lot." Sophia nodded slightly. "I do." The atmosphere between them softened further. Not rushed. Not uncertain. Just close. New task generated. Accept emotional connection. Ryan already understood. Sophia turned slightly toward him, standing closer now than before. The space between them had almost disappeared naturally over time. Ryan looked at her quietly. Then, very gently, Sophia reached up and adjusted a small strand of hair near his forehead. The movement was simple, but intimate. Ryan's gaze softened. Without thinking too much, he moved slightly closer as well. No hesitation. No pressure. Just quiet understanding. And then, very softly, Ryan kissed her. A brief kiss. Gentle. Warm. Nothing overwhelming. Just enough to make the moment real. Sophia didn't pull away. Instead, when they separated slightly, she looked at him with the calmest expression he had ever seen. "That took you long enough," she said quietly. Ryan laughed softly under his breath. "Yeah, maybe." Task completed. Reward, relationship bond strengthened. Additional reward, emotional awareness increased. Ryan looked at her again, then at the quiet city beyond the window. Everything felt still. Steady. Right. And for the first time, Ryan Carter realized something clearly. This wasn't just affection anymore. It was love, growing slowly. Exactly the way both of them needed. Open Book Daily Life of a SuperDadSystem. Chapter 73, Staying Close. Morning arrived quietly after the calmness of the previous night. Soft sunlight entered through the curtains, spreading across the apartment in warm shades of gold. Ryan Carter woke slowly, but unlike before, his thoughts were not scattered or uncertain. Instead, there was a quiet steadiness inside him that remained from the moment he and Sophia had shared. For a few seconds, he simply sat there, listening to the peaceful silence of the apartment. Then he noticed movement nearby. Sophia was already awake. She sat beside Liam, gently adjusting the blanket around him while keeping her movements careful enough not to wake him. The soft morning light rested against her face, making the entire scene feel calm and almost unreal in its simplicity. Ryan watched quietly for a moment before speaking. "You woke up early," he said softly. Sophia glanced toward him, and a faint smile appeared almost immediately. "So did you." Her voice carried the same warmth from the night before, but now there was less distance between them. The hesitation that once existed had quietly disappeared. Ryan stood and walked closer, stopping beside her near the bed. Neither of them spoke for a few seconds. They simply looked down at Liam together, sharing the same peaceful moment without needing to explain it. New task generated. Maintain emotional warmth. Ryan already understood what the system meant. This wasn't about dramatic gestures or complicated emotions. It was about preserving the quiet closeness they had slowly built together. Sophia looked up at him slightly. "You seem calmer today," she said. Ryan let out a quiet breath. "I think I am." There was honesty in his answer. For the first time in a long while, his mind didn't feel divided between responsibility, uncertainty, and change. Everything felt connected now: his life, his future, the people standing beside him. Sophia studied his expression for a brief moment before speaking again. "You know," she said softly, "I'm glad things turned out this way." Ryan looked at her carefully. Even with all the unexpected parts, a small laugh escaped her. "Especially those parts." Ryan smiled faintly. The atmosphere remained warm and quiet as they moved naturally through the morning routine together. Ryan prepared breakfast while Sophia stayed with Liam nearby, occasionally watching Ryan with subtle amusement whenever he became overly focused on simple things. "You're concentrating too much again," she said lightly. Ryan glanced back at her. "I don't want to mess it up." "You won't," she replied calmly. The confidence in her voice affected him more than he expected. Task completed. Reward: emotional stability strengthened. Additional reward: $110 added. Ryan barely paid attention to the reward notification. Instead, his focus remained on the atmosphere around him. The apartment no longer felt like a temporary space where people happened to stay together. It felt lived in, shared, warm. And as Ryan Carter stood there that morning, listening to Sophia's quiet laughter while Liam rested peacefully nearby, he realized something that settled deeply inside him. Love didn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes, it grew slowly through ordinary moments until one day those moments became the most important part of life itself. Open Book Daily Life of a SuperDadSystem. Chapter 74, A Place Beside Him. The afternoon moved slowly, wrapped in the comfortable rhythm Ryan Carter had become familiar with. After breakfast, the apartment settled into its usual calmness. Liam rested peacefully after feeding, while soft music played quietly in the background, blending naturally with the warm atmosphere inside the room. Ryan sat near the table with his laptop open, reviewing a few small tasks related to his growing online work. His attention remained focused, but unlike before, he no longer looked stressed or uncertain. There was patience in the way he worked now, a steadiness that came from finally understanding the pace he wanted his life to move at. Sophia sat nearby on the sofa, watching Liam while occasionally glancing toward Ryan. She noticed the small habits he had developed without realizing it: how he paused to think before making decisions, how carefully he checked details, and how naturally he balanced his attention between work and the people around him. "You're getting more serious about this," she said softly. Ryan looked up from the screen. "I think I have to be." Sophia shook her head gently. "No," she replied. "You want to be." Ryan paused briefly after hearing that. She was right. That was the difference now. He wasn't forcing himself anymore. He was choosing this life willingly. New task generated. Build long-term stability. Ryan looked at the screen for a moment before closing the laptop halfway. He understood. This wasn't about sudden success or dramatic changes. It was about creating something stable enough to protect the life they were slowly building together. Sophia watched him quietly before standing up and walking toward him. She stopped beside his chair, close enough for him to feel her presence immediately. "You've been carrying a lot lately," she said softly. Ryan leaned back slightly. "It doesn't feel heavy anymore." Sophia's expression softened at his answer. For a few seconds, neither of them moved. The silence between them remained calm and comfortable, filled with a closeness that no longer felt unfamiliar. Then, very naturally, Sophia rested her hand lightly on his shoulder. The gesture was simple, but warm. Ryan looked up at her quietly, his expression softer than before. "You know," he said, "things feel different when you're here." Sophia smiled faintly. "Good different?" Ryan nodded immediately. "Yeah." Her fingers remained on his shoulder for another moment before slowly sliding away. But the warmth stayed. Task completed. Reward: relationship stability increased. Additional reward: $120 added. Ryan reopened the laptop after a while, but his attention no longer felt completely focused on work. Part of him remained aware of Sophia sitting beside him again, closer than before. Not because either of them needed to say anything, but because being near each other had quietly become natural. And as the afternoon light slowly faded across the apartment, Ryan Carter realized something important. Some people didn't just enter your life. They created a place inside it, and slowly became impossible to imagine without. Open Book Daily Life of a SuperDadSystem. Chapter 75. The kind of evening he wanted. Evening arrived softly over Aurendale City, painting the sky in warm shades of orange and gold. Inside the apartment, the calm atmosphere remained unchanged, but tonight carried a different feeling for Ryan Carter. Not excitement, not nervousness, just quiet happiness. Sophia stood in the kitchen preparing tea while Ryan sat nearby holding Liam, gently rocking him until the child slowly drifted toward sleep. The movements had become instinctive now, something Ryan no longer needed to think carefully about. Sophia glanced toward him and smiled faintly. "You're good at that now." Ryan looked down at Liam briefly before answering. "I'm getting better." "No," she replied softly. "You already are." The words settled warmly inside him. New task generated. Appreciate present happiness. Ryan looked around the apartment quietly. The soft lighting. The peaceful silence. Sophia's calm presence. Liam sleeping safely in his arms. Everything felt incredibly simple. And yet, it felt complete. Sophia walked over carefully, handing Ryan a cup before sitting beside him on the sofa. Their shoulders brushed lightly this time, but neither moved away. Instead, they stayed exactly where they were. Ryan took a small sip before speaking quietly. "If someone told me a few months ago that my life would become this..." He paused briefly. "I wouldn't have believed them." Sophia looked at him. "Do you regret it?" Ryan answered immediately. "No." There wasn't even a second of hesitation. Sophia's expression softened again, and this time she leaned slightly against his shoulder. A very small movement, but enough to change the atmosphere completely. Ryan remained still for a moment before relaxing naturally beside her. Neither spoke after that. They simply sat together in the quiet warmth of the evening, listening to Liam's soft breathing while the city lights slowly brightened outside the window. Task completed. Reward: peaceful mind strengthened. Additional reward: emotional awareness increased. Ryan closed his eyes briefly, letting the calm settle fully around him. This was the kind of evening he wanted. Not loud, not perfect, just real. And as Sophia remained beside him while Liam slept peacefully in his arms, Ryan Carter understood something quietly but clearly. Happiness wasn't always found in extraordinary moments. Sometimes, it existed in simple evenings shared with the people who slowly became your entire world. Open Book Daily Life of a SuperDadSystem. Chapter 76. An Ordinary Morning. Morning arrived quietly once again, carrying the same gentle warmth that had slowly become part of Ryan Carter's daily life. The apartment remained peaceful, filled with soft sunlight and the faint sounds of the city outside. Nothing dramatic had changed overnight, yet Ryan still woke with the strange feeling that his life was becoming more complete with every passing day. He sat up slowly and glanced toward the bed. Sophia was still asleep. Liam rested peacefully beside her, wrapped carefully in a blanket, while one of Sophia's hands remained lightly near him, almost instinctively protective even in sleep. Ryan watched them silently for a few moments. There was something calming about scenes like this. Simple, unplanned, real. New task generated. Appreciate ordinary happiness. Ryan smiled faintly at the system notification. It was beginning to understand him better. Or maybe he was beginning to understand himself. He quietly stood and moved toward the kitchen, careful not to wake either of them. The apartment remained silent except for the soft sound of water boiling as Ryan prepared breakfast. Not complicated, just enough. As he worked, he occasionally glanced back toward the room without realizing it. The habit had become natural now, making sure everything was calm, comfortable, steady. A few minutes later, soft footsteps approached behind him. "You're awake early again," Sophia said quietly. Ryan turned slightly, noticing the relaxed expression on her face and the slight tiredness still in her eyes. "You were both sleeping peacefully," he replied softly. "I didn't want to wake you." Sophia leaned lightly against the counter beside him. "That's becoming a habit." Ryan gave a small smile. "I guess it is." For a moment, they simply stood together in the quiet kitchen while the morning light filled the apartment around them. No rush, no pressure, just calm closeness. Sophia looked at the breakfast Ryan prepared and laughed softly. "You're improving again." Ryan raised an eyebrow slightly. "That surprised?" "A little," she admitted playfully. Ryan shook his head with a quiet laugh. Task completed. Reward, daily care efficiency increased. Additional reward, $100 added. The system notification appeared briefly, but Ryan barely noticed it. His attention stayed on Sophia standing beside him, relaxed and comfortable in a way that no longer felt temporary. As they carried breakfast to the table together, Ryan realized something quietly. These ordinary mornings had slowly become the part of his life he looked forward to the most. Open Book Daily Life of a SuperDadSystem. Chapter 77, Falling into Place. The afternoon moved calmly after the quiet morning, carrying the same peaceful atmosphere throughout the apartment. Ryan Carter sat near the window working through a small online request while Liam rested nearby, unusually calm even for him. Sophia sat across from Ryan reading through a few work-related documents on her tablet, but every now and then her attention drifted back toward him, noticing little things. The way he concentrated, the way he checked on Liam every few minutes without thinking about it, the way he had slowly grown into this life without even realizing how much he had changed. "You're doing it again," she said softly. Ryan looked up from his laptop. "Doing what?" Thinking too seriously. Ryan let out a small breath and leaned back slightly. "I'm trying to make sure everything works properly." Sophia smiled faintly. "It already is." Her answer came so naturally that Ryan paused for a second. He looked around the apartment quietly. The soft afternoon light. Liam sleeping peacefully. Sophia sitting comfortably nearby. And himself, feeling calmer than he ever remembered being. Maybe she was right. New task generated. Accept present stability. Ryan closed the laptop slowly for a moment. This time, instead of immediately thinking about the future, work, or responsibilities, he simply allowed himself to sit there and appreciate what already existed. Sophia noticed the change in his expression almost immediately. "That's better," she said softly. Ryan looked at her. "You always notice everything." Sophia lowered her tablet slightly. "I notice you." The words were quiet, simple, but they affected him more deeply than she probably realized. For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. Then Ryan stood and walked toward the sofa where she sat. He stopped beside her before slowly sitting down close enough that their shoulders touched naturally. Neither moved away. The silence between them no longer felt uncertain. It felt familiar, comfortable. Ryan leaned back slightly while Sophia rested lightly against his shoulder again, her movements calm and effortless. Task completed. Reward, relationship comfort increased. Additional reward, emotional calm strengthened. Ryan closed his eyes briefly, letting the quiet settle around him completely. Everything that once felt complicated was slowly falling into place. Not perfectly, not instantly, but naturally. And as Sophia remained beside him while the soft afternoon light filled the apartment, Ryan Carter realized something clearly. Love wasn't changing his life all at once. It was quietly reshaping every ordinary day, until those days became the life he never knew he needed. Open Book Daily Life of a SuperDadSystem. Chapter 78, A Small Surprise. The next few days passed peacefully, settling into the steady rhythm Ryan Carter had grown comfortable with. University, small online work, caring for Liam, and spending quiet evenings with Sophia had slowly become the center of his life. None of it felt forced anymore. Everything moved naturally, as if the pieces had finally learned where they belonged. That afternoon, Ryan returned to the apartment carrying a small paper bag in his hand. His expression remained calm, but there was a subtle hint of anticipation in the way he walked inside. Sophia noticed immediately. "You bought something," she said softly. Ryan glanced at the bag. "Maybe." Sophia raised an eyebrow slightly. "That means yes." Ryan laughed quietly under his breath before walking closer. Liam rested comfortably in Sophia's arms while she watched Ryan with quiet curiosity. "It's not a big thing," Ryan said. Sophia smiled faintly. "You keep saying that before every meaningful thing." Ryan paused briefly after hearing that. Then he handed her the small bag. Sophia looked at him once before carefully opening it. Inside was a simple silver bracelet. Elegant, minimal, nothing overly expensive or flashy, but carefully chosen. Her expression softened almost immediately. "Ryan, I just saw it," he said quietly, "and it felt like something you'd like." Sophia held the bracelet gently for a moment before looking back at him. "You bought this yourself?" Ryan nodded. "With my own earnings." The atmosphere changed subtly after those words. Not because of the bracelet itself, but because of what it represented. Progress, effort, thought. New task generated. Express genuine affection. Sophia looked down at the bracelet again before extending her hand slightly toward him. Ryan understood immediately. Carefully, he fastened it around her wrist. His fingers brushed lightly against her skin during the process, and for a brief moment, neither of them spoke. When he finished, Sophia looked at the bracelet quietly, then at him. "I love it," she said softly. Ryan smiled faintly, relieved in a way he hadn't realized he was. Task completed. Reward, emotional expression increased. Additional reward, $120 added. But once again, the system reward barely mattered. Because seeing Sophia smile like that already felt like enough. Open Book Daily Life of a SuperDadSystem. Chapter 79, Closer Than Yesterday. Evening settled gently across Aurendale City, wrapping the apartment in soft golden light. The atmosphere remained calm after Ryan's small surprise earlier that day, but something between him and Sophia had quietly grown even warmer. Ryan sat near the sofa, holding Liam, while Sophia prepared tea nearby. Every now and then, his attention drifted toward her wrist where the bracelet rested comfortably. And every time he noticed it, he felt strangely happy. Sophia eventually returned and sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders naturally touched. "You've looked at it 5 times already," she said softly. Ryan blinked. "Was it that obvious?" Sophia laughed quietly. "A little." Ryan looked down briefly before smiling faintly. "It looks good on you." Sophia's expression softened again. The silence between them stayed warm and comfortable. Liam rested peacefully in Ryan's arms, creating a quiet stillness throughout the room. After a few moments, Sophia leaned slightly closer. "Thank you," she said quietly. Ryan turned toward her. "You already said that. I wanted to say it again." Her voice carried something softer now, something deeper. Ryan looked at her quietly for a moment before speaking. "You deserve nice things too." Sophia's eyes stayed on him longer than usual after hearing those words. Then very gently, she rested her head against his shoulder again. This time, Ryan instinctively leaned slightly closer as well. No hesitation. No awkwardness. Just comfort. Ryan didn't need guidance anymore. The connection was already there. After a while, Sophia lifted her head slightly, just enough to look at him properly. Then softly, very naturally, she kissed him again. Brief. Warm. Gentle enough to match the calm atmosphere around them. When they separated slightly, Ryan smiled quietly. "You're getting used to doing that," he said. Sophia's lips curved faintly. "So are you." Task completed. Reward, relationship warmth strengthened. Additional reward, emotional stability increased. Ryan laughed softly under his breath before looking down at Liam again. Everything felt peaceful, not because life was perfect, but because the people beside him made even ordinary moments feel meaningful. Open Book Daily Life of a SuperDadSystem. Chapter 80. The Kind of Life He Wanted. Morning arrived slowly after another peaceful night. Ryan Carter stood near the apartment window, holding a cup of coffee, while the city below gradually came to life. Behind him, Sophia sat on the sofa with Liam resting comfortably beside her. Soft sunlight filled the room, warming the quiet atmosphere they had built together over time. Ryan looked around slowly. The apartment was still simple, still modest, but now it carried something it never had before. Life. Real life. New task generated. Recognized personal happiness. Ryan remained still for a moment after seeing the notification. Then he smiled faintly. Because for once, the answer came easily. He was happy. Not because of money. Not because of the system. But because of mornings like this. Quiet conversations. Soft laughter. Liam's calm breathing. Sophia's presence beside him. Everything had slowly become important without him noticing exactly when it happened. Sophia looked toward him from the sofa. You're thinking deeply again. Ryan walked back toward her slowly before sitting beside her. Just appreciating things. Sophia smiled softly. That's good. Ryan glanced at Liam sleeping peacefully between them before looking back at her. This is the kind of life I want, he admitted quietly. Sophia's expression softened immediately after hearing those words. Then, without saying anything else, she gently intertwined her fingers with his. A small movement, but meaningful. Ryan looked down at their hands briefly before smiling again. And this time, the feeling inside him was completely certain. Task completed. Reward. Inner peace strengthened. Additional reward. Emotional awareness increased. The system faded quietly afterward, leaving only the warm silence of the apartment behind. Ryan leaned back slightly while Sophia remained beside him, their hands still together as the sunlight filled the room around them. Everything wasn't extraordinary, and maybe that was exactly why it felt so valuable. Because as Ryan Carter sat there with the people who had quietly become his entire world, he realized something clearly. The happiest life wasn't always the loudest one. Sometimes, it was simply the life that made you want every